Okay. Thank you for the nice introduction again. Today's discussion is a little bit, technical. Actually, I was asked to present on skills and ways to publish in top journals. But I think before we can do that, we have to be skillful and mindful of how to publish a prestigious and reputable journal first. Then top journal will be much easier. So although I know a lot of institutions have this mandate that they keep asking our colleagues to publish in only top journals, A journals. And in terms of annual review exercise, assessment, they keep telling the colleagues about we only count A journals. Don't waste your time in publishing anything less than top journals. But I have the opposite ideas, okay? Because what I see in my junior colleague, what happened is that top journal is not easy to publish in. Some of us know the rejection rate is about 85 to 90%. So every 10 papers they submitted it's only accepted after 2 or 3 revise and resubmission. So very likely what we submit to the top journals, 90% will not be published, will not be accepted. So what ends up, those papers are so disillusioned and disappointed that colleagues put those papers just inside the cabinet, and that's it. So I would suggest that all of us step back a little bit and to go back to the basics and see what we can polish our ways and our skills to practice to publish in prestigious and reputable journals. Actually, if you want to publish any paper, you can publish, particularly nowadays. There's one of my slides, it said there's always a home for any research papers. Particularly nowadays, a lot of publishers view publishing papers, academic papers, as a business. So if you could give a process fee for over $10,000 per paper, there's a lot of journals asking you for your papers. But we're talking about journals that are reputable and prestigious, okay? Now, why is it important to publish, to do research, and then to publish it? Research is a form of knowledge. It's different from information. Knowledge, research is something that we ask a question, we do, we design a methodology to test out our hypothesis, and then report a result under various criteria according to your discipline. Whereas information, it's more like a thought. Whatever you think, whatever you feel, you can present it as information, okay? So knowledge is different from information. Knowledge production is important to advance science and enrich our knowledge base. And it's only possible when we generously disseminate our knowledge to others. And the classic outlets for knowledge production is peer-reviewed journal papers, books, presentation of research papers at conferences and meetings and workshops. A particular peer-reviewed journal papers are easy. How many of you are in the academia? Okay, so you all know that it's very important. I think way before this, for grant allocation, tenure, promotion, decision, it's important for getting a job in the academia. When we recruit new colleagues into the academic department, the number of peer-reviewed journal papers really does matter. Okay, really matters. Okay, very rarely we hire anyone without any good record of publication in peer-reviewed journal papers. So the first step you got to entry to the academic world is the publication in peer-reviewed journals, and thereafter is for grant allocation, whether you had tenure, where your contract got renewed, and where you got promotion. So all of us in that area, particularly in academic, is particularly important to us. Other than those, there are also other outlets. For example, Nowadays, more and more people talking about publishing our results through the social media. And then newspapers, interviews on radios and televisions. Now, this formal outlet is less formal and it's less subject to checking and double checking, and less stringent to validation. So it's counted less as a form of outlet. So scientific outlet basically is based on journal papers, books, and conference presentations. Why do we publish? So different sector of the community have different, goals in publication. For us as an individual, it's for employment, tenure, promotion, career advancement, etc. But for society, it's also important to publish whatever research results for dissemination, for innovation, and for growth and well-being. For publishers, nowadays publishing academic papers becomes a business. I don't know how many of you receive letters or emails that, can you send me these 5 pages? I'll publish it right away. The first email you ever receive feels so happy. So you send them, and they start say that we'll accept your paper, and the PAS, whatever they call it, processing fee is $5,000. Whatever currency it is, okay, it's always 30. I found out whatever currency is always 3 zeros. So of course that stopped. So it's a form, publishers tend to look at it as a form of making money, but also there are some journals, they make it as a form of publicity, because other than publishing journals, they also publish other things. So it's a form of publication. It's also a form of prestige for certain publishers. We all know later on that certain publishers have a much better reputation than the others. Okay, so they would tend to, if they're more prestigious, whatever published will be utilized by policymakers and the society. So, for departments, they want faculty to be published because of assessment. Later on, we'll talk about it. Reputation of the department and reputation of the discipline. Okay. So for psychology, I have a psychology background. People keep saying psychology like to publish everything, and very trivial thing they also publish. Okay, so we're known for publishing, very emphasis on publications. Editors, okay, they want to publish good papers. All editors want to publish good papers, except those who were employed as editor for a journal that's aimed for commercial purpose of making money. So for editors, for classic journals or reputable journals, we all want to make good journals. So have sympathies on the editors and associate editors. So we tend to reject papers, but journals also have very, very limited number of page limits, okay, issues. We cannot accept all papers, so we have to make a decision. So as a journal editor before, sometimes the decision is very easy to make, but sometimes the decision is very difficult. So university, more and more, it's very important nowadays that publication record of the faculty is for assessment. Okay, our AE in the British system, in the Hong Kong system, wherever academic system, the research assessment exercise, they always count. I think I had that experience way back 20 something years ago when our AE was first tried out in Hong Kong. So every one of us was asked to submit 3 representative papers, 3 representative publications for assessment purpose. Our department, there are about, for example, I remember about 10. So if everyone is an active researcher, so to speak, it's at 100%. Okay, and that at that time the decision is just a formal exercise. It does not have implication of how much funding the RGC gives to the university. Nowadays, it counted how much research funding, how much student quota that you're allowed to take in for RGC. So it meant a lot of things. At that time, our department, although we are all active researchers, the 2 prolific researchers It's a liability. And now we have 80% active researcher because we submit something. I think all of you know who is Professor Michael Bond, okay? He submitted his famous handbook of Chinese psychology. But then we got the feedback, books does not count in psychology. So, and one of my paper was impress, and they said impress paper don't count, okay? So later on we said you have to be very careful about what counts and what does not count if your mind is talking about tenure, career advancement, and grant allocation. So just a repeat for internal career, external career, the departments. Nowadays, more and more publication, academic publication is not just ranking, it's also very severe financial implications. How much student you're allowed to take in, number of students that you take in, that means the income resources of your and then allocation, how much the RGC, the central funding agency is allocating to each university. I just give an example how important it is. A certain university in where I work, I don't want, because the PowerPoint will be up, I don't want to put the names up. So in the university that I work in, currently is ranked number 23 in the world university ranking. It's one of the world rankings, okay? So all they count is overall, what is your score, teaching, research, citation. These two are related to publications, okay? Industry income, okay? And international outlook, okay? That means how international exposure, whatever, international reputation. Industrial income is how much consultants, this is a new thing. So it's not that all ranking count this part, but just to show you out of all the criteria, academic publication, research, and citation occupy 2 categories out of the 5 categories in terms of world ranking. And there's another QS, World University Ranking. Our university ranked number 11 among many, many, many others. So every time this comes out, we will have an email from the provost. Good job, well done, keep working, okay? So it's a number 1 in Asia. So you also see they even have more detailed, okay, criteria as to what they count and not count as citations per faculty, okay? We were not rated very high on citation for faculty, but we rate very high on international faculty because they hire someone, they're very international, their faculty. We count in a psychology department, it was represented by 5 continents. Okay, so this we ranked almost full score, okay? And citation, so we keep saying that. So we have received information from our top management level. You need to publish in A+ journal. A is not good enough. A+ journal, okay? And so that's how we the message to, again, okay? So this is how our research publications impact on our university, impact on individual faculty. So when we do research, when we're talking about publications, we need to know what is our approach to research. There are basically 2 models, okay? But actually, there's a model 3, the hybrid model. Model 1 is what we call the classic basic research, okay? And this is the one it used to be the crown prince, okay? So if you do even RGC, okay, the first few years RGC in Hong Kong, they specify they prefer basic research, not applied research. So for example, if you study the effect of the intervention, basically there's no way you can get RGC in the first few years when it was set up, okay? But later on, because it's changing now, that the funding, the way they look at university, they said it's not just applied, it's not just basic research. applied research is equally important. So in terms of the model, we can look at, and sometimes it's not easy to differentiate, okay? And the best model now is model 3, the hybrid model. That means in your research, it includes a basic research component, basic, for example, psychological process component, and then an application component. Say, for example, if the best example is if I want to look at, an effect of intervention to some problems, then if I add, that is a model 2 research and apply research. Then I add in a model 1 component to it is the basic process. I want to, before I do the intervention or during the intervention, I want to see how the brain functions. For example, if I want to deliver mindfulness program to a group of people with a certain problem, okay, behavior addiction people, okay, internet addiction, then a model 2 research will be I deliver a intervention program to them and see whether evidence-based research, okay, so and derive a very vigorous intervention to them. That's a model 2, okay, and or another model is I do ask some questions that answered more to ask a more applied question, and whatever I got will be really more useful for application. One of the example, okay, I was also sitting on quite a lot of funding bodies and review board. One of the example, the problem with some of our colleagues, for example, one example, I don't know here, but for our colleagues in public health, in the medical field, okay, they don't ask basic questions, okay? For example, if you remember a birth through coming in, they are not the department really exploring, where the virus and what those bacteria come from. They are exploring how best to prevent and how best to, educate people for a large sample. So most of the question is asking a question for applied purposes. So they basically, in the first few years, when they applied to our funding body, basically everyone turned down. All the proposals turned down. Okay, if you don't get funding, how can you deliver research? How can you publicize? How can you publish your research when there's no research? Okay, so before we publish, one very important is what approach do I need to take to my research project? So the very first question we are asking. So right now, the best model is the hybrid model. So if you're designing a research to ask for funding and then to publish it later, do think about whether it's an applied project. If it's an applied project, can I add in a basic research component to it? If you ask if your project is a very basic research, then you also need to ask, can I apply my hypothesis answers to some situations, okay? So for example, if you study, I think in your, at least in your case, I do write something, okay? You are branching out to autistic children, right? You study something about the brain, okay? I write, this is confidential, I'm supposed to tell you I write something. So what we recommend is, okay, I think at one point, our colleague was talking about some brain functions, okay? And then we were recommending, can you extend this into whether your result can be applied to a special population, for example, autistic children. So that is something that I remember, it may not be you or somebody else, yeah. So anyway, so now, that's what we call, another thing we call, so the research approach, when you design your research, you also need to think about, whether you can get funding, okay? And a hybrid model for publication is much easier than either one of them. Than either model 1, a classic paper, classic research question, or applied. Later I will discuss the really A+ journal in the past just publish basic research papers, okay? But nowadays they publish more and more on the hybrid research, okay? So another thing we also talk about is high impact research. High impact research does not equal to good research. High impact research does not guarantee you to be published in an A+ journal, okay? It's only high impact and well-designed research, excellent research paper can get into the A journal. Now, in academia, traditionally we value model 1, okay? It's my experience. I've been in the business for 30 years, 30-something going to 40 years, despite my young age. Okay. The first year really see the differences. Okay, they focus really on model 1. Okay, at the very, very beginning, when I started as an assistant professor, already working on women's issue, gender issue. I was told for my tenure that all publication in gender study research and gender journal does not count. And it really does not count. Okay, but nowadays we would not say that. Okay, but just to tell you, the RGC told the priority is basic research, and at least my tenure does not count anything that is applied. Okay, so top rated journals have a strong focus on model 1. For example, in psychology, the top journal, one of the top journals, is Journal of Abnormal Psychology. Okay, a lot of them, if you look at the older issues, is on basic psychological process or abnormal populations. Okay, so but nowadays, as year comes, there's another journal, Journal of Consulting and Clinical. They do publish on intervention studies. So you can see that the time changes. The Journal of Abnormal Psychology is much, much older. It has 100-something issues. And the other one that published intervention or applied research is much younger. Okay. So top rating journals, they have traditionally they have a strong focus on model 1. But model 2 becomes more widespread within university because we are more focusing on problem-based learning, and we are also focused on how our research finding translates into practical use. Okay, so it's not just asking a question that's of interest to academia and interest to those who are in the laboratory. How could we utilize, how do these millions of dollars spending on this particular research be applicable to apply in everyday life to the rest of our community? How is it of benefit to the rest of the community? So there's increasing pressure to place research in a wider context and how it can have a wider impact. So it's increasingly focused on model 2. But the best model nowadays, we're talking about hybrid model, model 1 and 2. So the very important, in order to publish in good journals, reputable journal, you must have a good research topic. So I think that's a good saying, the garbage in, garbage out. Okay, if you can just do any research. But then whether it can be published depends on the quality of the research itself also. But of course, a good topic, an impactful, a well-designed topic is a necessary condition for publishing in top journal. But it's not sufficient. Okay, there are other things that make your research findings make it to the top journals. So first, before you choose a research topic, these are the questions we need to ask ourselves because it's very frustrating. We always told the student, if you want to go to academia, it's a very, very delayed gratification, your career. So before you choose a research topic, do I know the field and its literature well? Okay, so I don't know. Nowadays, we review papers. And we also receive comments from reviewers. This comment is always valid. Your literature is not exhaustive. There's still some more literature, with important literature you did not cite, and your literature is so old, This comment, I'm sure all of us receive this kind of comment. So because the information is so wide, so abundant nowadays. So it's really important to really look into the literature. In evidence-based research or whatever, this is the evidence, okay? The literature is part of the evidence. So doing research, you need to really look into the evidence, that is the existing literature, very, very carefully. And you need the most updated literature. The lifetime knowledge is shorter and shorter. What you learned 5 years ago is not valid anymore. So you need to really keep on. It's particularly frustrating, okay? The time that we decide to do a particular research, then we look in all the evidence, then we come up with a hypothesis. There's 1 year, 2 years, then you wait for the funding another year, then you conduct the study another 2 years, then after you analyze the result, half a year, so faster, and then you write up so from the time you think about the project, you propose your project for funding, it's almost average of 5 years. So people just, dig out their proposal and then send it to the journal paper. So your literature is not most updated, okay? So, and there's, sometimes people always say, that is disaster. When I look up the literature again, someone has done it, has published it. I said, be it. So then I said, you must cite it, okay? You don't cite, people don't know. Okay, even if it's exactly identical, you have to cite it. And then find something that's different from them. So you don't think that if you don't cite it, then people don't know, okay? And most of the time is the truth. For myself, 30% of the time I submit a paper, I review the literature again, there is a study doing similar thing. So that's what happened to most of us. Then you have to add the reviewer, add the author, and probably your paper goes to them for review. So you don't want to send to someone who just published a paper and this person on the similar topic don't cite that. That person will have a very bad impression on your paper, okay? So it's not disaster. It's maybe a good thing, okay, for you to come up with something that is different from them. If it's identical, what's happening, then you aim lower. Okay, so the key is that if it's, at first you thought it's a B+ journal, but if there's a similar paper coming up, and also a B+ paper or A+ paper, then you should send it to a B journal. It's no point in sending A journal. You just waste your time. Okay, but it's not disastrous to the extent that you put inside the cabinet. Okay, so that's all the question you need to ask yourself. The very first thing is that so these questions need to keep on asking. Okay, when you first think about the research, when you ask for funding, when you conduct the study, when you write the paper, when you submit the paper. So these are the questions you have to identify whether you're still filling the gap anymore. Okay, maybe another paper has been published. Okay, another question, the second last one, is the timing right for this question to be answered? Is it a hot topic or is it becoming obsolete? Just like I told my students, all the students, including psychology, the very first project they want to do, I want to do depression, the cognitive bias, the negative bias. I said, don't do it. Each year there are over 1,000 studies on that. It's obsolete. Can you think of something new? Okay, so you need to ask, is it an obsolete topic that nobody cares to, if it's a very well consensus already, if there's lots of research been doing on it, there's no point in doing it. So when you formulate the research question, you need to be very very exhaustive in a literature review. Will my study have a significant impact on the field? And of course, we always think it's an important impact. And that's why, team meeting, consultation with colleagues, to talk about the research ideas. That's why in most academic departments, there's always a seminar, a departmental seminar, that very few people, faculty, okay? So at the point that we had to make it mandatory for students and teachers and faculties, and it's not something you have accomplished. It's not something published in a paper. It's ideas. That's why we ask students to present the thesis topic to us. So we also ask the faculty, if you want to apply for grant, if you want to embark or conduct a start research, talk about it in the departmental seminar. So you get feedback from others. And whether the impact you think your research is on is to other people, at least in your discipline, think similarly. Some colleagues are very friendly and some are very critical. So you welcome those critical comments more than it's a very good research and I think it contributes a lot. That's no use, okay? So look for critical comments. It doesn't feel good, but it helps. It really helps. So choose topic. Again, don't waste time on dead or dying topics. Do not write papers close to tenure clock with breakthrough ideas. Now, this is another part, another thing that our junior colleagues always do. Okay, they always have this, one of the things when you are about to promote or when you got your tenure, we always ask, what is the research agenda? Okay, what is a plan, other than a PhD thesis? We tend to break away from our thesis supervisor, we want to start something new. But there's a timing to start something new, okay? So if you are close to tenure clock, I don't know what your tenure clock is. For us, it's 3+2. Don't start a breakthrough research at year 3, okay? There will be nothing will come up from your breakthrough ideas, 2 years. And if it's a breakthrough ideas, you got many, many rejections, okay? Funding rejection, Sometimes it's safe to work on a safe topic, okay? But a safe topic will be easily a dying topic, okay? But if you want some we encourage breakthrough ideas. But in reality, if you're close to tenure clock, particular assistant to associate, do not try something too breakthrough. And if you try, that will be not your main portfolio, okay? It will be part of your side portfolio. So you can onto a main portfolio that is with your supervisor, with some topic that you feel relatively safe. If it's a brilliant idea, you can start it, but don't rely on for your tenure. So far, I've been tenured on the tenure committee for 20 or something years. We never tenure someone with a breakthrough ideas with no outcome, particularly nowadays. In past years, we still invest on people's potential. But nowadays, we don't invest. We look at deliverables. The whole philosophy has changed, okay? I was tenured the 3rd year that I was at HKSYU. Why? Because they thought I had potential. I was an okay case, but there are cases that they do not realize their potential. So the whole academia has changed. You have to evaluate 3 years. So we can promote associate to full professor based on deliverables from the breakthrough ideas. We also never promote associate to full professor based on breakthrough ideas. So we are all talking about deliverables. So we always advise people, if you want to breakthrough ideas to get in an editor, of course you want to do breakthrough ideas, you want to do it eventually, you hope to publish in top journals. So don't do it when you are about time to get tenure from assistant to associate. Once you get tenure, start your breakthrough ideas. Then by the time you apply for full professor, you have deliverable from your breakthrough ideas. So that's a strategy. So So the safe, topic is extend the existing literature, do a refinement, do a modification. Replication is not recommended nowadays. Okay, if it's simply just particularly, we always argue there's nothing done in Chinese culture or Asian culture. It's not an argument anymore. Maybe it's possible 30 or 40 years later that I want to do it, this culture, this culture, this culture. If you want to do it, it's not just one culture. It's many, many cultures. Okay, and if to have this very strong argument that these cultures are similar or different. So replication is not recommended, and it won't get published anywhere most of the time. Okay, not to even talk about B+ journals. Okay, if it's a pure replication, it probably will not get published. So when we look at paper in top journal, that's how some strategists do it, how we advise a student doing the thesis. Look at a paper in a top journal. Look at the limitation section and see what you can do with the limitation. Can you add to the limitation? They said as a limitation, can you do it? Okay. For example, the limitation is that I only do it on a certain age cohort. We're not sure whether our research finding will be applicable to other age cohort. Then you can work on the limitation and add different age cohort to wherever the A journal paper published. So you might have a chance, but remember to cite that person. Okay, so that's our strategy. So extend existing literature, particularly working on the limitation. That's one way to do it. So we strongly discourage just a simple replication with the Asian sample. And write something creative. I don't know what it means. Write on interesting topics. So these are the things that people have been advising. Of course, it's interesting. Otherwise, I would not do it. But whether it's of interest to others, and that's why our departmental seminars, case conferences comes. Okay, if your colleagues fell half asleep, and even psychologists don't know what you're talking about, lost interest in what you're talking about, then it's not interesting subject. Are the topics in line with philosophy or focus of the department, university, society? This is very realistic. Okay, each department nowadays, when it comes to RAE, research assessment exercise, or whatever visiting committee, it's a comment that we go to any visiting we do a lot of visiting. It is a recommendation we always make. Your department is too segregated, the research. You need to find 2 or 3 main themes from your department. So, and they always say that, having said that, even if your department has identified 3 or 4 themes, your individual faculty can do whatever they want. But it will be very likely that faculty will be working on their own. So the impact will be much lower than working as a theme of the department. And sometimes even some departments discourage a certain type of research. Okay, so you need also to look at the philosophy of your department and university or society. Okay, so that was something that we have to keep in mind way before we publish. So there's people talking about what is a good research. Good research might be easier to publish in top journals, but it's a necessary, but again, it's not sufficient condition. So in order to publish top journal, you need to look at your own research. Does it fulfill the necessary condition of a good research? Is it feasible to do it? Is it interesting? Does it have novel ideas and ethical and relevant? If you talk about ethical, okay, recently we had a case of the mutation of that. Okay, they can do it. They're interesting. They're novel. They're relevant. According to it's relevant in a way. Okay, we mutate the gene so that to overcome certain disease is very relevant, but the next question is ethical. So I think all of us, at least working in academic setting, wherever we start the research, we will have to go through the institutional review board. But for some settings, so okay, they might not have this institutional review board. Okay, so you also, even if your setting don't have, you also need to be mindful of the ethical issues in your own discipline. All right. So that is something that we have to assessment of quality. So these are is it credible, contributory, communicable, and conforming. So these are all the groundwork for your research. Now comes to the beef of the burger. Okay, so your talk is about publication in top journals. Don't talk about research, but you need to at least do a good high impact research with good methodology. So I did not talk about the methodology part because I assume all of us kind of familiar with all the methodology, okay? And also methodology, what is, if I just need one word for methodology, it's not more complicated methodology you go into top journals, okay? It's not, structural equation model don't guarantee very complicated modeling formulas does not necessarily get you into top journals, okay? Sometimes simple, as long, so you need to fulfill all the, later on what we talk about, then you publish. It's not just the more complicated, you have many, many ideas. So one of the jokes that we always had, psychology bulletin, is a psychological bulletin, is a top journal in our field. So one of the jokes back then is that you write something that nobody understands, then it'll get published. But that is not the case, okay? It's not the case, okay? So anyway, you also need to be mindful of the methodology, okay? But I have no time to talk about methodology. And there are indeed some methodologies, in top journals, they need some sophisticated methodologies. Okay, so and be realistic. A simple cross-sectional survey, one-time survey, whether it's 1,000, 2,000, a million, may not get into a top journal. Okay, so that's what we're talking about. So where to publish the paper? So we will talk about that many outlets for your paper, for your academic. When we talk about paper, that means a paper including your research findings. Okay. So where to publish? There are lots of choices. We focus on more the academic, more respected outlet. Okay, so we are not talking about mass media, writing to newspaper, magazine. Okay, those when we first started, it kind of counts, but nowadays basically nobody counts newspaper writing, no matter how much time you spend on it and how useful, how relevant it is to the society. So where to publish? Of course, we also have peer-reviewed journal. Okay, every journal is nowadays very smart. All journals that they are peer-reviewed. Okay, so peer review. Okay, there are also some non-peer review. Definitely, you should if you publish the paper for your assessment purposes in your department or wherever. If you want to be respectable journal, it should be a peer-reviewed journal. Peer review also left different levels of vigorousness, okay? Some are more vigorous peer review, 3 or 4 or 5 reviewers, and some just one. And some are blinded review, some are, have names and whatever. So, but basically the key is that other than you who write it, they will send supposedly an independent expert to read your paper, to assess your paper. It may be 1 to 5, okay, and maybe more. But even peer-reviewed journal, there are various levels: national, international, regional. National, that means journal or wherever. And regional, Asian Pacific Journal or wherever. Actually, American Journal, wherever is also regional, but it's always considered as a national, whether you like it or not. The UK journals, some of them, some of the assessment, okay, not all UK journal. We talk about American journal or UK journal is the publisher, okay, where the publisher, and the journal focus on. So in terms of assessment in the academic setting, American journal, whatever, is always considered as national journal. The rating is like this, okay, national, highest rating, international journal, lesser rating. If later on, if we look at impact factor, international journal is always lower than national journal, the impact factor. And rating is even lower for regional journals. That means that's why if you have good paper that you think, so I'm saying some of you are editor of a regional journal, I hate to say that, first send it to national. Okay, if you're very confident, you have a very good paper, because the impact is much larger, because it's national, that means the whole world. And then the review process is much vigorous. The respect to this paper is much more, and the weighting, in terms of how much it counts, how much credibility that people put in this research findings will be much higher, okay? Some of the national papers that we all know about, Lancet, JAMA, Journal of American Medical, whatever, and some of the BMC, the British Medical Journal, is considered national. But some of the journal from Britain, some assessment exercise considered as regional, okay? Asia Pacific, definitely regional journal. International journal, wherever, you don't need to, because, and the rejection rate, the criteria, the requirement is also very different. If your study is based on Hong Kong sample, it's very difficult to get into national journal, a top national journal, be realistic, okay? So if you're just based on Hong Kong sample, unless it's very, very good. So if it got published in a national journal, it should be rated higher, okay? So nowadays, okay, the worst thing what happens nowadays, all these famous national journals, like American Journal of Psychiatry for mental health is the top empirical journal, okay? It rated very high. So we used to be forever, we collected data from Hong Kong or Singapore. They used to accept us. Somehow 10 years ago, they have a side journal called the Asia Journal of Psychiatry. Basically, everything Asia goes to Asia Journal of Psychiatry. And American Journal of Psychiatry, for example, the impact factor is like 5 or something, because it's an old journal, and they publish, the top, randomized controlled trial, all those, very strong, well-grounded top papers. And the Asia Pacific Journal, I don't even know if they had impact factor. Okay, so so if you decided, first of all, if you write up the findings, if you want to submit it, you have to decide whether it's national, international, or regional. The weighting is according to here. But you also need to be realistic. If you're just a sample from Hong Kong, no matter how good it is, it's very difficult. Sometimes you're not good enough. It just, as an editor, I will have to consider whether your result will be applicable to this larger audience. So I had this experience, okay? I had something on pathological gambling. So I submitted to Psychology of Addictive Behavior. It's supposed to top journal in that behavior. And I even know the editor. So he very nicely said, your research is very good. But we typically do not publish just from one particularly non-Western, okay? Because we are not sure whether your result can, how about you also had a comparison group with English-speaking people? So at the end of the day, we compare with Australian sample. It got accepted right away. So we take another year to conduct a side part. So also, that's why you said if you want to do an Asian sample, if you just collected data in Hong Kong, if you want to get it in the top national journal, you need a Western comparison group. That's the situation nowadays. So So it is really the case. If you just based on Asia, or just based in Hong Kong or Singapore, they will always have this comment, or they send it to the regional journal, the sister journal that's a regional journal. So think about when you plan your research, then you need to think about, can I have a very comparable comparison group for national top papers, top journals, national top journals. Another question we ask, do we submit our paper to general journals versus specialist journal? Okay, for example, I can only cite I can only cite my own experience with psychology, because if I cite other, I might say something wrong. If I cite journals in management or sociology, I might be wrong, but I have confidence in citing psychology. For example, I have a study. I have a very, very difficult, decision. I have a study on Hong Kong, pregnant women, the eating disturbances during pregnancy and after pregnancy, follow-up study 1 year, and how is it related to their, parenting and stuff like that. And with the view that Asians, when they are pregnant after delivery, they have special eating regime, okay? So basically, it's very hard to have a comparison, group for Western people, okay? So we don't have a comparison group, but we have a very good longitudinal data. And findings are quite exciting. And at that time, there's not so much, because very few people look at the eating disturbances during, we take for granted pregnant women eat more. Okay? It's better for them to eat more because he's eating for 2 persons. So we're deciding whether we should submit a journal paper on this whole thing, or a specialist journal. There's once, luckily, the decision is not that difficult at the end. There's a specialist journal called International Journal of Eating Disorder that unusually had a high impact factor of 3 point something, 2 point something. So then, but sometimes you have some of our colleagues do have a very, very difficult decision of whether submit to a general journal or versus a specialist journal. A general journal tend to have high impact factor and tend to have a wider audience, readership, because other than your specialty, people in your discipline, not in your specialty, also read it. For example, if you are, another example, if talking about language, bilingualism, okay? The decisions whether to publish it in a journal talking about general things, or publish in a journal talking about language. So that's the, but the pros and cons, general journals tend to have high impact factor than specialist journal. But they tend to reject your paper if you're too specialized. You see what I mean? Because sometimes may not be of your quality. Okay, it's just that they think it's not have enough interest of that. Editors do not want to publish papers that are so specialized that the readers start to feel boring and stop subscribing, and libraries stop subscribing. Okay, so now another big thing coming out, open access. I think it's a big thing now. About 15 years ago, we were explicitly told that we don't count open access papers. Our AE specifically listed, we don't count open access papers. Frontier and wherever started to come up. And they themselves did a lot of study about wherever, and they argued that papers published in open access is equal quality, usually is not lesser than on open access. And open access is much quicker. The turnover, the turnover and in print is much faster. But traditional journal now also had online first, okay? So differences start to get smaller. So if you had the choice, if you look at the impact factor, there are different types of impact factor. Okay, we'll look. Open access journal nowadays had their own impact factor, and it's much, much higher. So you will always, sometimes you receive email that there's a news that, we just published a paper within 1 month, we have 5,000 readers, and then 100 citations, okay? So they also developed their own set of citations, metrics, and the impact factor metrics, okay? So in your assessment, eventually when you are assessed for tenure and promotion, I think the strategy is to list both the traditional journal metric as well as later we talk about the citation. Google citation is 2 or 3 times higher than the Thomson SS citation. And you don't just cite one or the other. If you just cite the Thomson citation, this is at your disadvantage. But if you just cite the Google citation, you tend to be lying. People will look at it, so cite both. Nowadays, the strategy is to cite both. And if open access journal has a class as an impact factor of the ICS, whatever name later on we talk about it, they also cite that. But nowadays, open access journals have their own citation, have their own impact factor. Okay, so whatever you have in terms of assessment or submitting our institutional assessment to the RAE, because it's disadvantage, you cite just the traditional one, it's much lower. So in RAE, we cite whatever you talk about assessment, cite everything. Okay, list all possible metrics. ISI rated journal, International Social Science, International Science Index Journal. Actually, nowadays we don't talk about peer-reviewed journal report. We talk about ISI journal. Yeah, because almost all journals call themselves peer-reviewed, but not all peer-reviewed papers are listed in ISI. Okay, they have certain criteria to fulfill in order to be listed as ISI. So we are now only counting, for our institution, we only count ISI journals. Higher impact factor versus lower impact factor, if we can, of course, high impact factor journal. But you also need to, later on, we also need to be mindful of the rising journals. Some new journals are the blue chips in the stock market. So I remember there's a journal in clinical psychology called the Clinical Psychology Review. It was about 20 years history only. I saw the first issue. The first few issues, it was invited, okay? And then the second year, it takes about 10 years to have an impact factor. When they first come out, it was over free. Now it's over 20 or something, only with a short history of 20 years. Another journal, I regret very much I did not submit one to them. It's health psychology. There's a journal called Health Psychology. I saw the birth of it. And the first impact factor comes out at 0.9 something. Then 3 or 4 years is 1.5. And it already said, we don't publish cross-sectional research. Another journal in business, I had this experience, is Journal of Organization Behavior. Its impact factor is very, not top, but very decent, very reputable, very respectable. At that time, when we want to submit, then we saw an additional phrase: we don't accept cross-sectional. So very immediately, based on the same paradigm, we have a study tool which allows the children know. Okay, so about teacher stress, and with both studies, it takes 3 years later, it got published. So you see, that depends on, can you wait for another 3 years to get paper published? So you look at, new journals have a plus and minus. When they first new, it tends to be the criteria less, and the impact factor, sometimes it didn't even have the impact factor. So the next blue chip that I'm waiting is the International Journal of Stress Management in the APA. it's an APA journal. APA journal, American Psychological, anything from American Psychological Journal, its impact factor is always high. Yeah. So that's now another thing we need to talk about is reputation of the publisher or journal of a professional society. A journal of a certain professional society is always respectable. For example, American Psychological Association, anything that they publish is very respectable. Even disregard the impact factor. There's a journal called, I used to submit paper, it's a Women's Quarterly. Okay, it's published by APA, so I bang on it as a bullshit. But the impact factor keep going down and going down. Why? Because people, even if they're doing gender issue, they submit to the general journals rather than a gender journal. The name is Women Quarterly. So it's a specialist journal. So even people, for example, a lot of gender issues talking about family violence, sexual harassment, all those, well cited articles, they're from general, general journals. Okay, so, but having said that, journal and the professional societies, because they do have to keep up with the society reputation. So they tend to be more respectable. Okay, so if you have the choice of a group of papers, okay, a group of different journals, choose the affiliated with the professional society, okay, and of course the publisher, okay. I don't know if you still receive this email. Maybe I turn them down too often. Nova Science. Did you still receive the email? I think it stopped because when we were junior, they keep writing to us, send a paper, we publish it in a book at no cost. When we were young, we did have book coming from them. They come in series. I think they're still in existence. But then the thing is that to the extent people know that when they said you write for Nova Science, they just laugh, okay? So don't waste your time with a publisher with that kind of reputation. Now, we are all aware there are several, there are ratings, there are weightings, there are rankings for different publishers. Later on will come out, okay? And so you also need to look at where does the the journal publish, or what publisher, okay? So high acceptance rate, low rejection rate. Top journals tend to be like that. Tend to have high submission rate, a very large number of submission, and very low acceptance rate and very high rejection rate. Because what I start hearing these comments, okay, and then I know why a lot of papers are being rejected without going out for review for these top journals, okay, because the people said that's what we do in the past also 20 or 30 years ago. We sent to the top journals because the review is so rigorous and get the feedback and they improve. But now they know our trick. Sorry about it. Then they just said, sorry, we will not be sending it out for review. But that is also good because you can send it to somewhere else. Okay, so don't think about you get to send to a top journal just to get review and to try our luck. No. Because sometimes we say, I hear my students or junior colleagues say, I saw some very poorly designed papers published in top journals. I said, look at the team. Actually, a lot of top journals papers, some of the papers are invited. They want to have quality from renowned researchers. But these renowned researchers are very busy. They ask their students to do it, and they work on it, but they leave that, but their name is still on it. Okay, so we said we don't know whether it's an invited paper or whatever the background. Okay, but coming from nowhere and you are not part of the team, it's not that easy, okay? And plus, there's no luck. It really is not. It's not matter of luck, okay? It's a matter of hard work. And also, it's a bet to just get feedback, because these people, if your paper sent to these reviewers, you exhaust 2 or 3 reviewers already. And nowadays, people are not too eager to review papers. So it's very dangerous that you exhaust your good reviewers that give you constructive feedback. But those who read your papers with half open, half shut eyes and make comments that does not make sense, okay? So whatever journals, and once you send to that journal, you cannot send it again unless you are asked to resubmit. So in other way, you're one journal less, okay? So that's speed of decision making and final publication online or in print. That's of something that we also, some journals are famous for very slow. Nowadays it's much easier because they submit online. I don't know how many of you go through that stage. We had to go history. We have to write the paper, print it, and send it. And there's no DHL at that time. And send it over carbon paper, A4 carbon, the whole bunch. And there's no DHL. You have to buy, I think Express Mail, I think it's that come up. So online is much faster. And a lot of journal, good journal, top journal, usually give you an idea of turnover time. Yeah, every year there's one issue talk about how many submissions, how many rejections, how many acceptance, and what's the average turnover time at each process, okay? So the other thing is chapters in a book. Where do I put the weighting? In most RAE, at least in my discipline, the weighting is ISI journal, authored book. Authored book, that means the author or authors write the entire book. And a lot of times, we were specifically told in the past, edited book. So different people write different chapters. It's not counted, even though you said each chapter author review each other. So that's why we said some discipline may be different from psychology, So each discipline you have to be very specific to lay out the criteria for your colleague and to ask the RAE what they counted. Because RAE, sometimes there are people from very previous years that they don't count, okay? So you have to also educate, whoever's assessing you, and you also need to talk to your colleagues about that. Which publisher, editable counted less than author book? Now, we always talk about impact factor. Just put it simply, yearly average number of citations to recent articles published in that journal. So how many people cite you, okay? Now, impact factor is a reflection of the journal, not individual paper. So a journal could be very high impact factor. That you might have the paper, each paper might not be of the identical high quality. Just like they invite, for example, invited some renowned expert, they asked the doctoral student to write it, but they cannot reject it, so they have to put it. But so impact factor is to tell people the journal itself. It does not. That's why sometimes we have to look at individual papers in a journal, even though it's a high impact factor journal. It's not a perfect tool, but it's at least some measure of the objective quality. Now, another thing is any journal that publish a lot of review papers. The review papers get to be cited much more frequently than individual studies. But my fault, I was being scolded by one of the reviewers. All your reference are review papers. Have you read individual papers? Which I said, which is true. I did not read individual papers. So some of the reviews are very smart. So in your paper, if there is a review paper, you must cite it. Okay, if there's a review paper in the topic, you don't cite it, it's very, very bad. If there's a meta-analysis, you must cite it. If you don't cite it, the latest one, okay? If you don't cite it, it's very bad. But on top of that, you also need to cite individual papers, okay? For journals that purely publish review papers, they always have very, very high impact factors, okay? But if you are not experienced, if your name is not established, and a lot of the top review journals are invited, like in our discipline annual review of psychology, it's all invited papers, okay? So don't ever think of submitting to them, okay? So review papers sometimes are invited. So if you do review papers, you must make sure that whatever review journal submitted, are they invited? Or so review papers tend to have high impact factors. Now, impact factors, in a nutshell, is this a summary of all the different disciplines. Just to show you an example. All right, so I need to move fast. We recently do a RAE, and we were asked to list our top journals that you recognize as the top journal in your own discipline. And it takes us 2 years to do the exercise because everyone said the paper that I publish is top paper. Okay, of course, so argue, particularly if your discipline had different sub-discipline. So they argue, keep arguing and argue. So we were asked to benchmark. This is one example from our university, just recently come out after 2 or 3 years. So in terms of, for example, just give you area specific. For example, clinical, we develop clinical, cognitive, developmental. So if we're doing an RAE, if we're assessing a colleague, if you think you're being assessed, you also need to be mindful of that benchmark. Okay. So for it just gives you an idea, in terms of clinical journal abnormal, basically if you publish one, you establish your status as the one in good in that. So if you look at these journals, there's one basic journal, abnormal is basic journals, consulting clinical, applied model 2 research they publish, and most of them are hybrid research. And clinical psychology science is also a hybrid journal. Behavioral therapy and research is a hybrid journal. Clinical psychology review is a review journal, okay? So cognitive psychology, I don't know which one is more basic. So these are examples of psychology benchmarking. And this is a you can see each university, each institution has a different benchmark. When we do the benchmark, we have to take the 5 universities that we aspire to, and 5 universities are peer university, and look at what they benchmark their journals. Okay, this is what comes up, but it looks funny. Is there a marketing colleague here? Is this what are you agree on this benchmarking? Are you agree? There's a tier 1 is of course the top tier, journal consumer research, journal marketing research, marketing science. Yeah, this is the one that I published journal consumer is tier 2. Okay, so anyway, so this is just an example. Now, any economic colleagues here, this is what they benchmark economic, okay? American, one name it must be a top journal, American Economic Review. How can it be not a top journal? It's on our website, NUS website. Oh, but you cannot get in, it's staff only. So this is just one of the examples. Why we do this? Because we have to submit to whoever's doing the QS ranking, okay? And we can't say this one is a top when Harvard and whatever those, when all others rated otherwise. So we also need to benchmark with other universities. So this sociology. Sociology, our university still, because the group that focus on book publication is still very vocal, although the trend is also more on journals. Now for referee books, okay, must be refereed by the world top publisher. These are the names of the publishers that rated as A. Okay, you can tell Almost all of them are in America. So Oxford University Press, there's two levels Oxford University Press. They have one that's publishing very high level, one publish more on layperson. They tend to publish handbook, okay? So have to be very mindful. So these are just a glimpse of what these are the top publishers in sociology. So you can, if you have very good research project or the monograph, think about all this, yeah. Because I had case, I don't know what to talk, the publisher, one of Hong Kong publishers, I think the Hong Kong you or Chinese you, and the colleague has to write pages of pages, justify this is a referee publisher, is considered A. So if it's not on the list, then you have to do a lot of justification. Now we also talk about open access journal, its advantage. The atmosphere has changed, it's more acceptable now. And even nowadays in the grant, we can put the cost of processing fee into it. Yeah, so some, for example, in our discipline, BMC, British Medical, whatever, BMC journals, they're very high, $6,000 for, they said it's not very high. I was still the tradition, I never publish in things that I need to pay. But I think it's changing, it's changing. Those are very respectable, they are impeccable very high, like 3 point something. So if you so in your research grant, if Hong Kong allowed to budget it, you budget the publication fee into it and submit to those high impact, open, reputable, open access journal, because it's very fast. I had colleagues, they paid, okay, because it's from the medical, because medical colleagues need the results very fast, they pay, okay, and to check if your institution is one of the members, okay, if they're a member institution, you pay less. So I had a project with a collaborator in South Korea, in Seoul University, or in Korean University. They are member of that publisher. So the publication fee is almost more than half reduction, okay? So also institutional-wise, we can also talk about to help our colleague so to identify some of the open access journals. Because it's becoming, my last page is the next generation is open access journal. Because the printed journal is very expensive to the library. So in our did you ever go to the library anymore? I have not gone to the library for the last 10 years. Not that I have students, but I do everything online. So the printed journals are getting more and more expensive, and universities are not subscribing them. Okay, so persuade your institution to have more support of open access journal, becoming a member of them. And this is the way to go, open access, reputable journal, okay? So we also need to educate whoever assessing us, whoever decide the funding. And also nowadays, when you choose a journal other than the impact factor, there's several things you must know. You must look at the editorial board to see who are they, and to see anyone in Asia Pacific. If it's Asia Pacific, that's probably them with handling your and so see if they are your friends or enemies. If your friends, do not contact them, because once you contact them, the conflict of interest, they have to pass on somebody else. Okay, so if you're from this part, the institution from this part, on this part, the population is on this part, then if there's some editorial members in this part of the world, they probably send to them. And if both of you are friends, that person will probably need to declare conflict of interest. Okay. One very important thing is, do not write to any of that person to get some initial feedback. It's a definite conflict of interest, because we had a case way back. Okay, and somehow conflict of interest, the concept is not as clear way back then. So they're friends, so they give some review, some feedback, and then it got published. Of course, someone could report to the editor, and eventually the paper has to be withdrawn. So that's something. So so look at who's there, and one important thing is anyone in your area in there. Okay, if you do this topic and no one in the area, then they will be passed on somebody else. They are the one, particularly you have to look at associate editors and editors. They are the one who make the final decisions. And even though if they send out for 3 reviewers, if 2 against 1 is for publication, the editor, associate editor handling can still say no. Yeah, based on various reasons. One of the reasons is that we have received so many good, I think you saw those emails before. Yeah. So make sure those associate editors are not your enemies, one thing. Particularly if you have brilliant ideas, if you're challenging their ideas, okay? And of course, the journal metric aims and scope and the types of papers they are soliciting. If they said no cross-sectional data, do not try your luck. You just waste, they would just send you back nowadays. We waste another 3 weeks. If they said no normal participants, okay, for example, some of the medical journals, they specify it has to be clinical sample. Don't try your luck. We tried to argue at one point, pregnant woman, we could pass. It's not every woman pregnant, okay? It's not abnormal, but it's not the average woman. So we got it. Okay, so we were able to pass through this barrier. This journal psychosomatic research nowadays very strict. In the past, it's not as strict. We passed through with normal women who went for sterilization. Okay, but now I think last time we sent someone with cancer survivors. They don't consider as clinical also. So they're getting more and more strict nowadays. And if they said no qualitative studies, nowadays a lot of journals, if they accept qualitative, they usually also accept quantitative. Some journals specify no qualitatives because simply that they don't have expertise to review it. So don't try your luck also, okay? Types of articles that you have to consider. I have a big decision at one point. Whether you submit it somewhere else or as a full paper or submit in a 5-page in a top journal. What decision you make? Okay, I was asked SARS. You all remember, we are the age. Okay, some of our students don't know what SARS is. As SARS, it happened in May, so the outbreak was in March, so it died in May. So the study was carried predict how people work. The factors predict whether people wear masks. Okay, something like that. So we immediately submitted to American Journal of Public Health. It's a top journal in the area. The paper is already short, okay, 20 type pages, including everything. Because we can't write too many because nothing is known at that point. We just simply name identify factors that predict whether people take certain preventive behaviors. No theories, no more. We got some models, okay, but very simple. But it's longitudinal, pre and post. And the journal said, we had a space in September. That was about July, they told. And if you write it in a 5-page type page, that come out as 2 printed pages, we will publish it. Will you do it? I was debating and debating. Because my paper, they did not say that they turned down the paper. So we come across that situations like that. I have a student also come across this. I said, jump for it. Of course, it must be a good paper. It's good to just have 1 page in Lancet or half a page in Lancet than 30 pages somewhere else, okay? Because one thing is that in this limited space, you can only report limited things. the important thing, of course, with the limited space, you can only report the certain things. The details, okay, or from another model, another perspective, you can do something else, okay? So there's a decision for all of us to make, whether you want a full paper or short communications and brief report, okay? Because if they ask you to do it as a short communication brief report, the merit is there. But it's just that it is not worth, it is because page of particular top journal, usually that's what top journals do, okay? They felt, it's not deserve, I hate the word, that 20 pages of the precious page, but it's important findings, okay? So my suggestion, jump to it. If it's a top journal, a brief report, a short communication is better than a 30-page submitting, rejecting, submitting, rejecting. So that's something. But I think the student agreed to it, I forgot. But I definitely agreed to a short report because it's right the next month, next issue, just happened there's space, okay? So now you must know the word page limits. And nowadays, if you submit online, if you're beyond the word limit, it just stop there. Readership, okay? And current hot topic. And before you do the research, you have to look through the project, particularly when you have a finished paper. If you have the identified journal, go to the journal again and read the latest 2 years, all the issues in the latest 2 years, in the last 2 years, and see if any similar topics. If similar topics been published, and yours, unless it's really, really, really different perspective and really fulfill, kind of make up for that limitation and agree upon by that person, because most likely whoever's already published there will be the one who review your paper. Otherwise, basically, you can think of another journal. It's not that your paper is not good enough, okay? For example, okay, in the past, I can just cite this example. In the past, Asian sample is very precious, whatever topic. But think if the journal in the last 3 years, 2 years, had one paper on Asian sample, that's pretty much no help. You have to submit it elsewhere. Because particularly if it's a national journal, there's so many different countries. Why is it Asian? Or, Hong Kong and Singapore of importance to them. Okay, or even China now. Okay, so when you submit the paper, go through your intended journal at least the last 2 years. Okay, what do editors look for in paper? Of course, this all we know about: originality, relevance, research methodology, clarity, and things like that. So I couldn't repeat more. So another thing that's I think more. I would like to highlight some of the publication strategies. Of course, you need to write clearly, simple English. And assume your paper is read by someone who is not in your discipline or who is not expert. Because most likely the editor or associate editor may not exactly in your discipline. And they are the one who make decision. And they are the one who make decision partly based on the reviewer's comments, okay? So, and the strategy is published in journals, which the fast delivery, your knowledge is disseminated faster and of a wider audience. That's why we say online access journal is the way to go, right? And you also need to, whenever you publish, you also need to know your department, your organization, what they value. Of course, knowledge, you value your own, but at the end of the day, you still need to be assessed, okay? And of relevance to your department, your university, and of the society. And another very key strategy is find a good partner, a good co-author. Usually it does not need to be the most senior people in your department, the most senior in the field. Those actually are not the not the best because they tend to have lots of work to do, lots of mean work to do. They are out in the world already, out there already. They are not keeping up with whatever your topic, the latest development of the project. So have some good co-authors, partner with someone, and particularly international partners. Because if you have the international partner, the chances are your project become, multi-country. More than one country is also the possibility bigger. And once they got involved and they have input and your perspective is wider, and then your relevance is more credible if we can replicate in different countries, different regions. And your partner also had the friends, so your citation and whatever's looking at your paper is also higher, the chance. So in the past, we valued single author paper a lot, but now it's a minus to your portfolio. If most of your study are single author, it's a reflection you can't cooperate with anybody, particularly if you're getting senior and senior. So in the past, it always a single author. Of course, you need some single author paper to show that you are independent, but think about research project. How can you do it all by your own? Unless you want to claim all the credit by your own. Okay, so single author now is, what usually our strategies in your publication portfolio, 1/3 is single author, 1/3 first author. Single author is also first author. The 2/3 is with other authors, but this 2/3, 1/3 you'll be the first author. Another 1/3 you let somebody else be the author. No point in everything as the first author. It does not look good on your portfolio, particularly if you're associate to full professor. What does it mean? If you are on application for associate to full professor, everything single author, of course, is not good nowadays. Everything is single author. What does it mean? That you're not mentoring your junior. If you're taking all the most important credit to yourself. Mentoring is an important criteria, and it's hard to quantify, and these are the things we look at. Whether you co-author with a student, if it's co-author student, can you mentor a student to be the first co-author? If you're working with other colleagues, you are open-mindedness to let other colleagues be the first author. So in the assessment, okay, even though your university is not assessed in such a way, but you never know whether you are here forever, okay? Because it's very mobile, anywhere, you can move anywhere. So it's good to keep your portfolio in terms of publication portfolio, 1/3 single author, 1/3 co-author, 2/3 co-author with others. With this co-author, you only need, about a few of them to be, first author. The rest, show that you can work with other people and mentor other people. Yeah. So that's usually whoever takes the first author takes the majority of the work. Okay, so if you co-author with somebody else, the work is shared. Okay, so also diversify your research portfolio. Okay, so in diversify your research portfolio, the paper you publish will also be diversified. Okay, you can publish those who are emphasizing model one, which tend to have higher impact factor. Okay, and the other thing is maintain a stock of papers under review constantly. Okay, research is consistent. I can't say take a break. Later on, I'll show you. I was hospitalized in 2 years. With that 3-year assessment period, it really suffered. Not the immediate, subsequent. Okay. So it needs to be continuous. And the other thing is also very important. I don't know where I put it because I'm running out of time. So keep a a diary or a log of all the versions of your papers. Okay, so every time you submit, you work on one version, you submit a paper, they ask you to do it some way, then you write another one. Keep all the versions, final versions, that you think final version, and think then whatever's responding to whatever certain editor to certain journal. Usually in my file, I have each journal that I submitted one file. So keep your various, because I find that some of the things I talk about, actually some reviewers agree with that, while other reviewers disagree. So, and then I got lost where to find it. So the thing is that, and it's true that even nowadays, I need to submit 2 or 3 journals before it's finally accepted. So it's good to have, sometimes I need to completely reanalyze my data using a different methodology, using a different statistic tool. So keep a good, log of all the versions, all the data set, and all the working file, all the statistic, in one whole thing. Okay, so systematic record keeping. And the other things, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't put all your great grand idea into one paper. Okay, it's just that it gets, when you get too many good ideas, it becomes not good ideas at all. You lost focus. So it's always advisable just to keep one main ideas, all right? And if, for example, one very example, if you come up with a model, a new model, revised model, if you want to test it and you want to replicate it, you stop there. Don't apply it so you have a model, you replicate with something, and then I will extend to another culture. Too much invention, okay? And for example, I develop a scale, and then I use this scale to validate my scale, and then apply it into different, in order to do validation. So you need to think about each paper should have no more than 2 main ideas, okay? Particularly in psychology, we always had to develop a model, improve a model. And if it's a new model, so to speak, the emphasis is always on your conceptualization of the model, rather than what you apply to later on. They always say, how can this be one way? It should be this way. It could be a DV and it could be an IV and things like that. So the entire focus is on your model. The rest is just, sidelined. The same as if you're developing a new scale, then the whole focus is on your scale development. So even though you try to apply in a very simple context, just to obtain the reliability, validity, and things like that, and save the real thing for another paper. So the initial concept modelization, the initial scale development, you may think of a lesser paper, because once you get that published, nobody will focus on that. Think about it, you use a scale, when it's published, nobody will go back to the scale, whether this scale is, it just reported right. Then they focus what you're talking about. But if you put too many things in one paper, too many new ideas in one paper, it got lost. Okay, so that's one thing. And sometimes it's also very advisable, we said, discuss your initial findings in your department, and also to discuss your initial finding in conferences. In the past, the conferences, but some conferences specify your paper should not be published, whatever you present should not be already published. But nowadays, they don't have that criteria. They're much more relaxed criteria. Sometimes you can present in a conference a paper that's published. But what we suggest is use a conference where there are people coming from don't know where. They have different opinions, they have different angles, they have different perspectives. The feedback is very useful. But one time you also need to be very important. Do not distribute unpublished papers to strangers. It's very true. Okay? So nowadays, people, in the past, in old days, we distribute papers to the attendants. Nowadays, we don't. Okay? And in your PowerPoint, don't include everything, okay? You don't know where people are. Because sometimes they may not, your idea, okay, in our setting, idea is, it has no copyright. Just ideas, if it's not published, it has no copyright. Whoever publishes is the first one, okay? Polished writing skill, I cannot say that. Some institutions hire professional editorial assistants. Sometimes it's useful, sometimes it's not particularly useful. The editorial assistant must be familiar with your jargons of your discipline. Submission to journals. There's some key things to that. Okay. They ask, when you finish the final version, wait for a while. Usually that's what I do, but not 1 week. I cannot wait. Maybe 1 day, 2 days before you submit. Eliminate trace of prior rejection. Okay, take out those that people submit paper to a rising journal, keep a lot of different versions. Journal space is very valuable. So sometimes you see the author keep publishing in that journal. You don't know the background. But if we are not part of the team, if we are not in a big team, it's very unlikely that they will publish your papers that frequently. Okay? And of course, check for related papers in the journal being considered, avoid journal which consistently reject your papers. This is true. Nowadays, I never submit any journal to JPSP because keep on rejecting it. So know the scope, preference, and biases of journal. Okay, claim power and publication. Okay, whatever you work on, although the world is large, it's still a circle that is very small. Okay. Nowadays, journals, particularly I don't know about other disciplines, psychology, medical journals, they always ask you to cite some potential reviewers. And I tell you, if you cite, they always say, we may not use those reviewers. If you cite 5, they will approach at least 3. And these 3, usually 1 or 2 agree. So it does matter what your recommendation. So even though they say, I do not necessarily, because it's so hard to find reviewers, especially, it's very, very hard. So whoever you suggest to them, assume they will use it. So don't suggest your friend, because there's a conflict of interest. Whoever name you suggest, do not write to them for input. Again, if you write for them to input and suggest them as a reviewer, it's a conflict of interest. And then, if you suggest any names, you check their background. Check. Of course, you know they must be probably in your area. Know the latest research, whether they're working on something very similar. If they're working on something similar, it's hidden conflict of interest. If they publish your study, where is their study? So, well, of course, we will be objective, okay? But it's so the strategy is know a little bit of your suggested reviewers. And particularly those who hold a very different viewpoint, okay? And then if you suggest some reviewers, cite them because they mostly go to them. If your study is related to them, if you cite them, if they publish your study, they have 1 more citation. Okay, so it's like that. Not to send papers for comments prior to journal submission. And this is all, I think most of us, Now the full paper in the 2nd tier journal or brief report in the 1st tier journal. Okay, if that's the case, go for brief report. Yeah. It's to the extent that unless it's a 1 page, 2 page, we are not counting the page yet. Now we go to the assessment to the extent how many pages in that journal. And who cites you? I said 125 citations. Who cites you? Are they your friends? Are they top researchers in your area? So we go to that extent. Yeah. Nowadays it's very elaborate, but I think at this point we don't need to bother about that. Yeah, as long as, yeah. So one step at a time. Reasons for instant rejection, sometimes it might not be base quality, but as a reviewer, many years, 80% of the rejection is based on lack of clarity, very confused ideas, too many ideas, and methodology is not vigorous. And we spend very little time talking about methodology, most of the studies, most of the ones, there's no basis to review the methodology. 1,000 students were sampled, just 4 or 5 sentences. Then, so in appropriate journal choice, okay, journals have too many papers, and your journal is not consistent with the aims and scope. Do not resubmit a rejected manuscript to another journal without significant revision. That's something that we tend to fall into, particularly with young researchers and students. They thought it's so good already. So I just, it's just because this journal is particularly harsh, and the reviewers is very critical, I just submit it or just cut and paste. If you receive comments from reviewers, even if they reject you, take it very seriously. If, with due respect to them, they sit down and read it and give you comment. I think most of us have been reviewers. It's not easy to do that. Yeah, it's always easy to say it's a nice study, but if you really give some comments and ask them to improve on, listen very carefully, respect to them. Even though it's rejection, if it's resubmit and revise, you must listen to them. Do not argue with them. Do not argue, and particularly do not argue with the editor. Be nice to them, okay? So this is something, because we have situation, particularly instant rejection, we just send it to another journal. You listen, you read the editor's comments very carefully. If it's good journal, it has 2 extremes. Good journal just reject without any reasons, just that with so various page, whatever, and cite the rejection rate. Another one, they do some preliminary review. Read them very carefully, okay? What happened? After external review, revise and resubmit, keep going, okay? So this is something, particularly be very, if you have tables and graphs, and figures, be very carefully, because most of the time we read the graphs and tables rather than your context. If it's confusing, particularly if your number percentage is wrong, it's a very, very bad impression. Okay, so that's comments. Revision or submission, I said, listen to the editor, the reviewer, do not bargain. No point. They have the ultimate say. And I also need some ethical. There's always saying that we are at the point nowadays when we said we do not submit too much, include too many ideas in one paper. We split the research and the ideas and resubmit into different journals. Is it multiple submissions? It's a very fine call. So you have to ask, is it multiple submissions? So if now, a very obvious multiple submission is that in the past, some studies present preliminary studies, okay? For example, the intended target is, for example, 1,000 samples. It has been a tradition in mainland China to do it. But I think they stopped now. When they collect 100, they have one paper. When they collect 200, they have another paper. The findings is slightly different because your sample is different. So that is multiple submission, okay? But if you have a distinct perspective, okay, distinct analysis that's different from the other paper, although it's from the same sample, it might not be considered as multiple submission. But in doubt, you need to ask the editor, okay? So I had this person, and nowadays, it's very powerful computer now. If you submit as an editor, as an associate editor, they'll come up with the names of all studies that have similar focus or keywords. Then you can't escape, okay? It's they know, how many studies have internet edition in Hong Kong, blah, blah, they all come up. And particularly with your name or your PI's name, your collaborator's name. So it's a very easy way to check whether it's multiple submission. If that's the case, it's very bad on you, okay? So redundant publication, again, okay, published study do not need to be repeated, of course, if it's published. And it's very strange when I read it. If you present or publish the abstract in proceedings, you can publish it in journals, okay? But if you publish in a book, you cannot publish it in journals anymore, okay? So that's the general, academic rule about that. Plagiarism, we know there's no way you can escape now. Data fabrication and falsification, okay? Improper use, all right? I think this is important to know. 9 p.m., 3P approach to all of us who intend to submit to journals. You need exercise. Rome is not built in one day. You need to write keep on writing papers. If you don't write papers, there's no way you get to the A journals. Okay, you need many B or B+ journals. Even though your department explicitly can't say, we don't count. But you need that as an exercise, okay? You still need that. So as a department head, we need to encourage our colleagues to start writing. Because if you look at some of our expertise, expert researchers, they start publishing in lesser journal. After several years, they become the expert. Established, they are the person doing this type of research. They start publish, and people start inviting you to write. Then you can access to the A journal. But if you don't write enough, you don't practice, it's very seldom that in a topic, once you publish it's an A journal, you need to have B+ journal in order to get to A journal. In our times, it's better. We have big Q and small q. Big Q is the quality, that means A journal. Small q is the number of publications. So in order for us, for example, in order to be tenure, you need 5Q, 2Q and 5, 1 big Q and 5 small Q. But nowadays, the message, you need 1 Q, 1 big Q. But if you don't have that 5 small Q, you can never get 1 big Q. So I think, message, I think we need to modify the message because some of our colleagues take it too literally. If you don't write to B journals, try to write to B journals, you can never get to the A journal. So same as if you don't start doing B types of research, you can never know how to do A types of research. If you don't get experience in doing B, how can you ask somebody to collaborate with you? So you have to establish yourself somewhere, okay? Practice, starting with the continuous, and seeking some internal review prior to sending out paper, okay? Persist, never giving up. Also be realistic in aiming high. So ask yourself, okay, very objectively, do my study, is that impactful? If it's just based in Hong Kong, is it so impactful that it will get an A international journal, even in basic journal? Because in basic journal, there's cut across countries, cut across cultures, okay? Basic psychological process cut across everything. In brain study, we don't just study gender. We don't, everybody's brain is the same. So be a realistic. If I'm a cross-sectional intervention study with one center, it will never be able to publish journal consulting and clinical. No matter how well the study is, it will never get that. So, but if I publish that intervention in a B+ journal and ask other collaborators to refine on this one, and including more collaborators in other countries, it might get into the A journal. So that's how. So A journal, as the top management, we always ask, or I say different things to them. When I do the assessment, I say, this paper, It's never published, so it's still in my cabinet. Submit to, to a B+ journal, second tier. No, I'm working on another A+ project. Okay, for the institution, providing funding, promote, and patience. Take time to publish, we all know that, but I think institutions are getting very impatient because institutions are being assessed every year. The funding decision is decided every year. So also you need to keep looking at their individual performance indicators. These are very crude. It's getting very sophisticated. You all know the H factor, right? You all know the Scopus and Google search. This is my 3 years. So it can be, do you look at this too? When we recruit staff, we ask them to provide all this to us. Okay, overall assessment. Okay, how much what do you publish in what journals? Overall performance, 70 publication in this. I was hospitalized twice in this period, so my performance is not good. H-index is throughout my lifetime. So it also tells you how much output in the top citation percentile. Okay, publication top journal, 20% is not bad. So my international collaboration is very good, 76%. But my academic corporate collaboration is 0. Okay, so if the rating is based on industry, our income, if you remember, our university is only 77%, because most of us only doing our research and involve very little with the stakeholders. Okay, so this is something that you can do it on yourself, and sometimes check on your colleagues too. Okay, so as a department, if we're setting a start with, we can have a general idea what our staff is like and what I am standing in terms of other. These are open data. Okay, you can always search, and you know what is your standing. Okay, so my concluding remark is: do quality research, find new concepts, use up-to-date methodology, and link up with international co-authors or co-authors with your department of interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary. Be very active to participate in international workshop, conference, summer institute, research visits, lunch seminars. Okay, but one thing that says, people keep saying that research funding is very, we only can go to conference, overseas conference once a year. Okay, but local conference, we find few local participants. Okay, these are the places you can participate, sharing. And just like departmental lunch seminars, okay, we have to provide free lunch in order for people to come. But these are the places where you can get feedback, to get new ideas. Apply for research grant publication, IS. So the strategy, ISI related journals, but it does not need to be a journal to start with. Okay, national journals, chapters book, and the future is open access journals. So you need to, for psychology, we're starting to identify a list of respectable and prestigious open access journals. One of the things that we keep very close look at the frontiers and wherever. It used to be we don't count them, but then they had their own research on their comparison with traditional journals, the citation or wherever. It's quite comparable with that. Some good journals. So people are more and more accepting of open access journals. And even those with the publication processing fee is also more accepting. So it's totally different from what been trained in the past. So is anything else? Sorry for overrun. Perhaps we have time for just a few discussions. Okay.